Hello, NFL football fans and fantasy football owners. Welcome back to the Extra Points Fantasy Football Show, the place where you get expert fantasy advice for champions. As always, I'm your host, NFL fantasy football expert, analyst, and draft scout Lance Goodman. We are 3 weeks into the NFL fantasy football season, and we're back on our YouTube page, back with another exclusive video. Today, it's called the Quarterback Spotlight. If you did not have an opportunity to, make sure you double back on the YouTube page and check out the segment called The Number One Spot, where we talked about what fantasy football quarterbacks could challenge Josh Allen for that top spot when it comes to overall fantasy football points scored at the quarterback position. When you look at what Josh Allen has been able to do over the last 3 to 4 years, and it's exactly what has him in that number one spot after 3 weeks in fantasy football, and that is accumulate in excess of 5,000 all-purpose yards and score a combined 40-plus touchdowns. So let's talk about some quarterbacks who have an opportunity to challenge him for that spot and talk about what attributes a fantasy football quarterback ultimately needs to have. When you look at Josh Allen, one of the biggest things that makes him a big threat is his dual threat ability, meaning he can get it done not only passing through the air, but also his ability to pick up rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Number two, the ability to throw the football for over 4,000 yards. We're really talking, 4,300 to 4,500 plus yards, and then 35 plus touchdown passes. And then ultimately what allows those things to happen is having the big time weapons in the passing game. And so I've got the list divided today into two sections. Let's look at group one. We're talking about the other dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL right now for fantasy football. In no particular set order: Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles, Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals, rookie Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders, and Green Bay Packers quarterback Jordan Love. When you look at those five guys, the one who has the biggest set of weapons is going to be Jalen Hurts. When they're healthy, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith make up a fantastic duo at wide receiver. And we know that running back Saquon Barkley is an absolute beast coming out of the backfield. And to add to the equation, tight end Dallas Goedert, who had a big game in week 3 with 10 receptions for 170 yards. We also know that Hurts is a big-time playmaker when it comes to using his feet to pick up those rushing yards and rushing TDs. So out of those group of 5 guys, you really like his chances. But we know that Lamar Jackson has ran for over 1,000 yards in the season. We know that Kyler Murray now has a dominant number 1 receiver, and Marvin Harrison Jr., a big-time playmaker at tight end, and Trey McBride. Rookie Jaden Daniels is an absolute stud early on. His all-purpose ability certainly makes him a threat. And then when you talk about Green Bay Packers quarterback Jordan Love, not known like the rest of those guys for his rushing ability and rushing touchdowns, but he did have 5 rushing touchdowns last year. I think the big thing that could potentially hurt his numbers this year was the injury he suffered in week 1, which at this point has had him miss the last 2 games. We'll see if he can get back in his groove and turn into the absolute elite quarterback that he was the second half of last season. Now let's move over and focus our attention on the pocket passers. These are the guys who do their most damage from the pocket in no particular set order. Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings, Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals, C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams, and Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. When we look at those quarterbacks, the big-time weapons is really what allows for all of those guys to excel. Quarterback Sam Darnold has played outstanding the first 3 weeks of the season, and that's been without his number 2 wide receiver in Jordan Addison and Pro Bowl tight end T.J. Hockenson, who's expected to return off the PUP list at some point this season. When you talk about Geno Smith out in Seattle, 3 big-time receivers in DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. When you talk about Brock Purdy, down a couple weapons right now. But if he can get back Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey to go along with Jawan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk, he's certainly got a chance to put up those big numbers. When you talk about Joe Burrow, now he has his number 2 receiver and T. Higgins back in the fold, along with number 1 receiver Jamar Chase and a nice supporting cast there. C.J. Stroud, 3 big-time receivers in Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, dominant number 1 receiver, along with running backs Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, who can do a lot of damage coming out of the backfield. Has a legitimate number 2 receiver now in Jameson Williams, and we're hoping that Sam Laporta can get back healthy and back in the fold like we seen him last year. Matthew Stafford is a guy who's down his top 2 receivers right now in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, which potentially could put him behind the 8 ball in terms of fantasy stats. But once those guys are fully back healthy, we know that Rams offense is pass heavy, and Stafford certainly can put up the big stats there. And then you talk about Patrick Mahomes. Yes, the numbers have been down the last year and a half, but we know Patrick Mahomes is a all-world talent individually as a quarterback, and we've seen him be a proven commodity. Back in 2022, without wide receiver Tyreek Hill, he still was able to pass for over 5,000 yards and 41 TD passes. That's going to wrap up our segment today. As always, make sure to visit www.NFLExporter.com. Get with me on my social media pages. Leave comments, spread the word, subscribe, like, comment. I'll see you guys soon.